Well, hi, everyone. Welcome once again to Unstoppable Mindset, where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. It's a fun thing to say. I am your host, Mike Hingson. Our guest today is the CEO of the Starlight Foundation in Australia, Louise Baxter. We met Louise through Sheldon Lewis and accessiBe, which is always fun. Sheldon is a good supplier of folks, and we can't complain a bit about that. It's a good thing. And so today we're going to learn about the Starlight Foundation, and we're going to learn about Louise, and we'll see what else we learn. That's why it's often called the unexpected meet. Anyway, Louise, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you, Michael. It's lovely to be here.
Well, why don't we start the way I love to start? Why don't you tell us kind of about the early Louise growing up and some of those sorts of things and adventures you got into or anything that you want to divulge?
Okay, all right. Well, I live in Sydney, Australia, and have done my whole life. I've traveled a lot, but I've remained here in Sydney. And so life in Sydney was just blissful. And I think what I remember most is just having fun with my friends. It was back in the day where, as a child, you'd leave home on your bike early in the morning and nobody expected you back till later on in the afternoon before dinner. And we had bush nearby. I can remember catching tadpoles. I sailed from the age of 8. My father was a skiff sailor here in Australia, and I had my first time in a sabo at age 8. We went to the beach a lot, so there was surfing and fun in the sun. I played a lot of sports, so I'm a netball player, which is kind of similar to basketball but a bit different. I played squash, so a lot of things happening, a very busy life. And I grew up, and I think this is the important thing, with parents who were not well off themselves, but we had a lovely life, but they were always raising funds, and our house was a centre for raising funds for people who were less fortunate, or helping out with the local netball club and things like that. So I grew up with parents who were very committed to working hard, but always giving back, even though they weren't, high net worth people themselves. So I think that's, a great basis for who I am today.
So you went to school and all those sorts of things like everybody else did. How did your attitude about dealing with people who were probably less fortunate than many and so on really affect what you did in school, or did you really sort of hone that spirit later?
No. I was always involved at school, and raising funds, and even, it took us a couple of buses to get to the beach back in the day. So I was in a local youth group, and we made a decision to raise the funds so that we could have one of the fathers, so that we could buy a bus, have one of the fathers drive the bus and get us to the beach on Saturday in quick time. So always looking for ways to, never taking no, well, that's hard for an answer, I suppose, always being able to be part of the solution and get things done. So that was happening while I was at school as well.
That's kind of cool. So you bought a bus so that everybody could get to the beach. How many people were there that had to get there and use the bus?
We had about 40 or 50 people, and even during the school holidays, we convinced a couple of the parents to take us on a trip through far west into, into our outback. So we went into kind of desert type lands, and we camped, and a sheep station let us sleep in the shearing sheds overnight. So that was quite an adventure as well. And we did that for one school holidays on that bus.
So was the bus, well, who owned the bus? Was it a school bus, or who owned it?
The youth group that
the group did. Okay.
Fundraising. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty unique.
Yeah, it is. And
Does
I have great memories of that with, green tree frogs in the toilets whenever you went to use a bathroom. They were always there looking at you and all of those kind of funny things that you remember, watching and learning farm life and seeing some of the animals sitting on the fence while they were being branded and castrated and all kinds of things. But as a city kid, that was really valuable to
pretty
see.
and unique, but certainly the experience was well worth it as long as you embraced it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So does that bus still exist today, or does the youth group still
Oh
exist now
no,
with new youth?
that's a very long time ago, Michael.
Well, I didn't know whether it might have continued with new
No,
youth.
no, no, no. And I've, moved locations in Sydney, so I'm not quite sure what's happening there now.
Hmm. It'd be exciting if new youth came along and took it over. But yeah, things happen
That's right. Things
and things
change.
evolve.
I'm just going to say their parents probably drive them everywhere now.
Yeah, I was going to say probably the adventure isn't quite the same as it used to be,
No, exactly.
and that has its pluses, I suppose, and its minuses. But there are also more scary things in one sense in the world now than there used to be, don't you think?
Yeah, there are. Well, there could be, or maybe we know more about it now because of our media and communications. So, um, you know, all the kind of predators that impact you as children were around then. I suppose accidents in cars are up because use of cars has increased. So yeah, there are different things that impact people nowadays. But us human beings, we're pretty resilient, and we always work out a way through.
Yeah. Well,
I should
and
say
it's
there's also a story from my childhood that I think is very relevant for what I do at Starlight. And that story is that you know how you have those family friends who you grow up with and you go on holidays with, etc. Well, that family for us, their eldest son was diagnosed with cancer.
mm,
And back then, survival rates for cancer were very different to what they are today and much
right.
lower. And he died when I was about 12. But as a child, I observed him suffering the pain of the treatment, and there was nothing like Starlight back then. And I saw also the impact that his illness had on his family. And I often think back to him, to those moments now that I'm at Starlight, because Starlight would have changed that situation and made it very different and far more positive for that boy and his family.
Hmm.
And I think about him and what they went through kind of regularly. So it's one of those things that's a childhood, it's a lived experience from my childhood, which, still kind of resonates with me today.
Well, yeah, and we're constantly evolving, so you can think about that and you can think about what might have been, but at the same time, the real issue is what have you learned and how can you now take it forward? And I think, as I said, that's all about embracing the adventure.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so absolutely take that forward.
Yeah, which is really what you have to do. So you went to college, I assume.
Yeah, and I actually went part-time at night. So I actually went straight into a work environment, and for an organization, and was in the marketing team just doing basic clerical work. And then I studied part-time at night.
Hmm.
So I did it a bit differently.
Yeah. Well, did you end up eventually getting a degree?
No, I have no degree, and which is something that's not, it's very unusual in the United States, I know.
Oh, I don't know that it's that unusual, but the other side of it is that what you learn and how you put it to use and how you evolve is pretty significant, and that's of course part of the issue. Not everyone has a college degree, and sometimes the people with college degrees aren't necessarily the brightest spots in the constellation either.
Absolutely. It's Yeah, there's a lot through lived experience, but I have, yeah, I've studied at various times, and most recently, I was awarded a scholarship, and I've had the experience of doing two short courses at Stanford University in the States, and I'm now on the board of the Stanford Australia Foundation.
Ah,
Um, and so that's been a wonderful experience as a mature age student.
that's fair.
Yeah.
I just recently was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, which formed the chapter at my university the year I was leaving. So I was able to go to the organizing meeting, but that was it because then I got my master's degree and left. And through circumstances, it was learned that all that happened. So last year I was called and asked if I wanted to become an alumni member. So
Oh, that's
I
wonderful.
finally got to be a member of a fraternity. Well, there you go.
Ah, congratulations.
Well, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I treasure it and honor it a great deal and spent a day down at my old university. I haven't really spent a lot of time there since graduating, well, back in 1976 with my master's degree and some business courses. So it's been 48 years. So there you go.
Mm,
Time flies.
it surely
Well,
does.
so what did you do? So you were working in the marketing world,
Mhm.
in a clerical sort of thing. And what did you do from there?
I then became an assistant brand manager, a brand manager or product manager, whatever you want to call it. And I worked at Reckitt and Coleman. I worked at Johnson and Johnson and at Arnott's Snack Foods. And Arnott's Snack Foods was interesting because it was a joint venture with Pepsi Foods
Mm.
from the US, because they were interested in the biscuit technology from Arnott's, and Arnott's was interested in their snack food technology. And so what we had was a situation where um, uh, we were sharing our expertise. And as a result, I was on the team and we launched Cheetos, Fritos, Doritos into Australia. So they didn't exist here prior to that. Obviously, Johnson and Johnson also, a big multinational, as is Reckitt and Coleman. And then after a number of years working on the client side, I decided I wanted to move to the agency world. And I moved to Leo Burnett Advertising Agency, where I stayed for a decade. I was on the board there. I managed accounts like the Procter and Gamble and Kellogg businesses, as well as local businesses like tourism businesses and wine, so hospitality businesses here in Australia, very big wine company, and also the United Distillers business back then. So had a lot of experience from both the client and agency side of working on big brands and growing big brands, which I absolutely loved. And we had a lot of fun, along the way in those days at all of the organizations where I worked. I made a lot of friends, and it's always important to have great friends from those experiences. And then I considered, I actually left, after I left Leo Burnett, I started an agency with two other people that's called Brave New World, which still exists to this day, but I haven't been part of that for a long time. And then I had this moment of considering that I could potentially do something more worthwhile with my skills than selling the products I'd been selling for all those years. And that's when I first made the decision to move to what I refer to as the profit for purpose sector, and moved to Starlight in a role, and at that time that was just a 6-month maternity position role. And I did that because I had great experience of brands from the client and agency side and promotions, so above and below the line promotions. I had worked on promotions supporting charity, so cause-related marketing campaigns. And I felt that the one thing I was missing, if I wanted to go back into a corporate social responsibility role, was that experience of working in a charity. And so I thought at that stage that my journey was going to be back to a corporate, because at that time, if you think this is over 20 years ago, triple bottom line was, and the third sector was really becoming important to organizations and to corporates. And so I thought I'd take my skills and go back to a corporate. But what I did instead was I went to Starlight. As I said, it was a 6-month contract, but after 3 months, the then CEO came out and said, "What would it take to keep you here?" I loved what I was doing, and I stayed at Starlight. I did stay for 6 or 7 years. I then left and went back to corporate world, and I came back to Starlight. So I left at the end of when am I up? I left at the end of 2007. I came back in 2009. So I had that experience of back in the corporate world, and I came back as the CEO.
It's interesting. You started out in, as you said, in clerical work, but you started out in marketing, which you liked. What caused you to do that? Why marketing? Why marketing and sales, if you will?
Well, I love marketing. I love brands. And I love the fact that, brand is a living and breathing thing, and you can grow and change a brand. And I love all the learning around consumer insights. That was my specialty within marketing. So actually understanding that consumer behavior. And what I say about marketing is it's hardly rocket science, because if you look at a young child, they recognize that they speak differently and use different language and words, etc., when they're speaking to their friends, when they're speaking to their grandparents, when they're speaking to their teachers, when they're speaking to their siblings. And so already the concept of, I have a different consumer in front of me and I need to change my language and what I'm saying, and my communication skills need to tweak. A child understands that from a very early age. So when I think about marketing, that's what you're doing the whole time. You're changing what you're saying and the way you say it, so that you engage more strongly with your consumer. And that's what I love about it, because communication is just so powerful, and you can take people on a journey. I'm also, you can change behavior before you change the attitude, but ultimately you can move people and kind of change their thinking and their habits.
What's a really good example that you participated in of that? I love a marketing story. Loving sales and marketing as I do, I'd love to hear a good marketing story.
Well, there's quite a few, and I'll give you one. I used to work on all the roads and traffic authority business, and at that stage, we were responsible for handling all the campaigns, from speeding to seatbelts to drink driving, etc. And what was really powerful about those was your results were that every day you came into work and the road toll was there, and the road toll was, up or down, and to work on campaigns which over years reduced the road toll because of the messages that you would communicate to people about speeding, etc. So whether people believed that they should be going, 10 kilometers slower in that particular zone or not, the messages of penalties being caught, whatever the messaging you used to slow them down in that moment, worked, and that saved lives. So that's an example. I also worked on brands such as Special K, and for me, we created a fantastic campaign here that ran for about 20 years, and it was based on the traditional Special K ads where women would wear clothes that they had years ago, and this one was about a miniskirt. But it was done in such a way that the woman was the strength in the TV commercial. She was the lead, and that grew the business and grew Special K at that time at like 3 times the market average for any product growth. So to see those things, and what I love is the results, and you get it very strongly in those moments, and it's exciting.
You mentioned having been involved with working with Fritos and so on, which strikes a nerve. When I lived in New Jersey, somewhere along the way, ranch flavored Fritos came into existence, but they didn't last very long. And I miss ranch flavored Fritos.
We used to do when I worked on those snack food brands. We did so much testing and to create tastes that are suitable, because tastes do change significantly, region to region. And so ensuring that we had exactly the right flavors that would resonate and sell here was really important to us. But along the way, we had some shockers. And we did have a lot of the specialists from Frito-Lay in the States out working with us to craft those flavors. So we eventually got ones that worked here and for this region.
Yeah, and I'm sure that must be what happened, that ranch flavored Fritos just didn't sell enough.
Didn't sell, Michael. You didn't have enough friends.
I guess not. Well, we didn't know enough people in New Jersey. What can I say? But we contributed as much as we could. My wife and I both loved them, and we bought ranch flavored Fritos every chance we got. But unfortunately, that really probably wasn't enough to keep it going. So
no.
We mourn the loss of ranch flavored Fritos. But you did that, and it's interesting because if I were to make this observation, in a sense, although part of your job has changed, part of your job hasn't changed, because it's still all about marketing and educating people. Of course, now you're on the not-for-profit side, but that's okay. But what you're doing is teaching and educating, and now you're doing it for more of a social cause than a profit cause.
You're exactly right. What we're doing every day, because is we're marketing our organization, and it's all about communication. And that communication might be very different with, high net donors to community groups who support us in terms of how they connect with us. The impact stories are the same, although you also learn that certain individuals might prefer programs that support children, or might prefer programs supporting older people, older children, or might support programs that support our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children. And so you learn that through all your discussions. So it's all about hearing, because marketing's about really listening. And so I am still, everything we do is about really listening and really hearing from the kids and the young people we support. We need to listen to their situation and what, from our program's perspective, is working for them. So I feel it's very, very similar to what I did, because I was a product manager. So I was always listening to our customers to create more relevant products, and then communicating to people so that we could sell those products. And the difference here is, back then they were the same people. So you would listen to your customers, then you'd be selling to them. And now what happens is our customers are the children and young people who are seriously ill and hospitalized. And our customers, the people where we're getting the funding from, are the donors who support those programs. So you break it into different groups, and we have far more stakeholder groups that you're managing in the profit for purpose sector than you do in the for-profit sector. But that keeps it interesting.
Well, so what is in what you're doing today? And I'd be interested to hear a contrast. But what does success mean to you today, and what did success mean to you when you were in the marketing world?
I think that's always, being the best you can be, and achieving the metrics you need to achieve. So that's not changed, and always having really positive relationships with, and partnerships. So for me, none of that's really changed. And I think that, authenticity is very, very important. And so I constantly say, with me, what you see, what you get. I'm the same person, no matter if you're a friend, a colleague at work, whatever. And I think that makes life much easier than if you were different people in different spaces. So I think there's something that's very consistent about that, and I am that kind of person who doesn't take no for an answer. It's just, okay, that's a bit trickier, but how can we get that done? So I'm always been solution focused, and I think that's really important. And I think, Obama has made comments about the type of people he wants to employ are people who get stuff done. And that's exactly me and who I look to work with. So none of that has changed. But for me, it's now incredibly important. We're changing lives every day. And I think that what Starlight does in this country is we believe that happiness in childhood matters, because happiness in your childhood is the strongest determinant of how you perform in your education, your employment, and with long-term healthy life behaviours. Children who are seriously ill have their ability to be happy significantly impacted. And so what we do is we support them with a whole range of programs, and I can talk about our theory of impact, but it builds their well-being and resilience. And I know that you talk a lot about, about fear, and I think resilience is that thing that gives you the strength to move through those things that may be frightening to you at some stage. And kids who are seriously ill are going through so much that is unfamiliar and frightening to them and painful. And so Starlight has been creating programs which are all about positive psychology and built on the tenets. If we can distract a child by something that's positive, help them to look forward to something positive on the other side of treatment, it changes their engagement with their healthcare and it changes their health outcomes for a positive. And so that's incredibly important. And we were using this a decade before Martin Seligman even coined the phrase positive psychology. And now as clinicians recognize, and they've recognized this for a long time, but are increasingly recognize the ways this can be used to create improved health outcomes. And let's face it, healthcare is one of the most innovative, fast-moving sectors you can possibly work in. And clinicians have changed and improved health outcomes for every illness and disease you can possibly think of. And that's amazing. And so Starlight's been part of that improvement in healthcare, but the recognition that your mental health and well-being is completely connected to your physical health and well-being. And so while the doctors and nurses, the clinicians, look after the physical, Starlight is engaging with the child within the illness and helping to lift their spirits, support their well-being, resilience, giving back that joy of childhood. Because, a clinician once said to me, Louise, in treating their illness, we steal their childhood. And so what we're about at Starlight is giving those kids back their chance to simply be a child and have that fun of childhood, which is where we started this conversation. Childhood should be about fun and having no inhibitions and not worrying, not a care in the world. And children who are seriously ill live in a very kind of adult world where they're dealing with concepts such as life and death. And that's not where any child should really be.
So when you're dealing with a child, what do you do to bring the child back to the child, if you will, as opposed to all the challenges that they're going through? Because certainly when you're dealing with a disease like a cancer or whatever, it is a very tough thing. So how do you bring that child back to being able to be a child, at least for part of the time?
Mm-hmm. And that's you're absolutely right. It's about moments, because and we talk about moments which matter. You can't do it for 100% of the time, but if you can lift that child and distract them and take them away from that, even if just for a moment, it changes everything. And we have a whole range of programs that cater for this in hospital and also in community. And last year we created nearly 2 million. So it was 1.9 million positive Starlight experiences for children. And that's the way we talk about it, because they're all so different. But we work in 3 general areas, and that is we work in partnership with the clinicians to transform the healthcare experience. And we even build physical spaces in the hospitals, all the children's hospitals in Australia, which are manned by a character called Captain Starlight. So we employ nearly 200 Captain Starlights who are all professional performers, and they work with the children and they engage. They don't perform, but they use performance skills to engage with the child and the child's imagination. Because a couple of things about children is that they are they have incredible imaginations, and they are also easily distracted. And one of the things about most parents is they're trying to work out how they keep their child focused. Well, we use the fact that children can be intensely distracted for good. So, for example, talking about that transforming the healthcare experience, some of our Captain Starlights will actually work in a treatment space with the clinicians, and they know how the treatment is going to unfold. Not so they could ever perform the treatment, but so they know when to distract the child, when to keep the child very calm, etc., throughout that procedure. But let's say it's a burns dressing change. That, to a child, the pain of having a burns dressing change is like having your skin removed every time the dressing is changed. And what we do is we have our Captain Starlights there, and children don't have the psychology of pain in their mind. They will be intensely distracted, and their pain threshold then increases by up to 75% by simply distracting them, which means then they don't need to have an anesthetic for their treatment, which means that child may not have to stay in hospital overnight because of that anesthetic, and etc. So by using the power of a child's mind, engaging with them, we can change that scenario. They won't feel the pain. Now, for an adult, that sounds weird, because if we were having that burns dressing changed on an arm, even if someone was distracting him, we'd be waiting for the pain. Whereas a child just gets absorbed in the distraction and is not waiting for the pain. And so that's the difference. So we transform the healthcare experience. We provide opportunities for children to connect, because social isolation is one of the key issues associated with serious illness and treatment. They're pulled away immediately from their local friends and family, often into, a hospital that's in the city, and that's the way our healthcare system works. The big children's hospitals are in the cities. The kids come out of regional areas and into that, so they're away from everything, all their friends, their bedroom, everything that's familiar. So that social connection is really important. That's part of what we do in our Starlight Express rooms, which are in every children's hospital. They also are TV stations within those hospitals and broadcast to the bedside of the child. So if the child's too sick to come into the Starlight Express room, they can be part of that and have that social connection from their bedside. So quizzes, for example, are really important for us. And we run a quiz every day. And sick children have lost that ability to compete in so many ways, and have fun and have that little banter that you have with people when you are competing. Yet a quiz brings that all together, and we always have prizes, but it means a child in their bed who can't physically come into another space with another child for issues in terms of their illness and infections and cross infections, etc. They can still be involved, and they can win the quiz and be on television and chat with the other kids. So those things are very important. And we also provide entertainment, because entertainment is a great way of distracting children. And so we talk about what we do. We transform the healthcare experience. We provide social connection that's so missing, and moments of entertainment. And our programs sometimes deliver all 3, but they're created for one specific reason. And so we're all about having fun. And for me, when I see a child come into a Starlight Express room, especially a child who's recently been diagnosed, you can see they're often in a wheelchair, they're holding an IV drip, they have their head down, their shoulders down, they have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They're looking like no child should ever look. And you see this child come into our space and start to lift. because a Starlight Express room is a haven away from the clinical nature of the ward. They start to lift, they see the space, they see the captain starlights, and for me to observe that same child 5, 10, 15 minutes later, roaring with laughter, completely forgetting where they are and why, that's the power of Starlight. And that's what we do through all our programs every day. And that moment lifts that child and builds their resilience and gives them the ability to go back into that next round of treatment, surgery, etc. So it is in that moment, and it changes everything.
How does the Starlight experience differ in America and our healthcare model here as opposed to in Australia? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, well, we man all of the spaces in our hospitals. So the hospital, when a new hospital is being built, they allocate a section that is the Starlight Express room space. We then build the Starlight Express room, and these are quite large spaces. And then we man it with our own paid team members and volunteers. That would never happen in your healthcare system. Just with legal issues and liability, etc., you'd never see that happening in America. So that's, I think, the key difference from things that we do. In Australia, we also are a wish granting organisation, and we are the largest wish granting organisation in Australia. And we have programs called we have a program called Livewire, which supports young people, so teenagers and up to the age of 20, and that is in hospital. So we then don't have Captain Starlights, we have Livewire facilitators, and then we have Livewire online. We also have a virtual Starlight Express room, which we created and trialed during COVID, because obviously everything around the world, and definitely in Australia, was in lockdown, and our programs were an essential service in the Children's Hospital, but we were restricted. And so we'd been toying with the concept of a virtual Starlight Express room for a long time, and so we used COVID as that opportunity to trial that. And we trialed it, it was very successful, and we're now rolling Planet Starlight into every hospital across Australia. All people need there is a QR code, and so we put up beautiful posters, which are also games that kids can play, that has a QR code, and they can go directly to Planet Starlight. And Planet Starlight is set up, has live shows of Captain Starlights during the day, but also games kids can play, directions how to do art. So if a child's seriously ill but at home or in another hospital, they can do all of this stuff. And it's not that you need a full paint kit. We do it understanding that children will be able to work with what they have that's near to them. We even have things like I Spy for an emergency room space, so that kids can stay distracted no matter what part of a hospital they're in. We also now support families who are in at-home palliative care, because 70% of children in this country who are in palliative care are at home. That's not necessarily end-of-life palliative care, but palliative care can go on for a number of years, and those families are incredibly alone and isolated. And so our Starlight Moments program delivers things to uplift that family and have them know that someone's thinking of them during this time. And again, it is those moments which really, truly matter.
So what do you know about how it works here, or what actually happens in America? Do you have any real notion about that? I mean, I understand all the legalities and all that, but how does it differ? What do they do here to be able to foster that same kind of climate?
Yeah, they're still about happiness matters,
right?
Which is fantastic, and they do that with I'm trying to think of the name now. Fun boxes that they have delivered into hospitals with toys, etc., for kids. In some hospitals, they are able to do a refresh of a playroom to make it a Starlight space, but it's then not like ours are manned every day with team members. They have little carts that help kids transport round the hospital. So they have a whole range of things that they can do within the limitations of the different health system.
It must be a real challenge to keep up the spirits of all the people who work for Starlight. How do you keep a positive work environment and keep everyone moving forward and hopefully reasonably happy in what they're doing? Because they have to see a lot of challenges, obviously.
Yeah, we're authentic with our commitment to positive psychology. And so getting close to 15 years ago, we started working with a group here in Australia called the Positivity Institute, and we started training all of our team members. So every team member who joins Starlight is trained in the tools of positive psychology, because you're absolutely right. And I use the aeroplane analogy. You know, if the plane's going down, you're always told that you have to put your oxygen mask on yourself, because if you don't put it on yourself, you're of no use to anyone else. And pos psych's like that. You have to care for yourself, and self-care is so important, because if you are not caring for yourself and if you are not topping up your own cup, then you're of no use to support and coach and help other people. And so we have positive psychology is the one authentic thing that just, moves right through our organization. It's at the heart of everything we do for the children and young people. And importantly, every question we ask ourselves about every business decision is, will this improve the way we support the seriously ill children and young people? Yes or no? And then what we do is we carry that through, because for us to be able to provide the support we do, and you're absolutely right, working often in very challenging situations, we need to know how we can look after ourselves. So pos psych flows through the whole organization, and we are an organization that is a great place to work in Australia. There's actually, a survey that's done annually, and corporates and other organizations are ranked, and we're always in the top group of performers there. So it's also very critical to maintain a high performing team, because we need to be able to have our team bring their best self to Starlight every day. And that's what pos psych does for us.
How does that work? What do you do? I mean, you obviously have people who go into situations and they get hit with so many sad sorts of things, but obviously you're able to bring them out of that. How do you do that?
Well, as I said, everybody's trained up front and recognizes the tools or has the toolkit for pos psych, but we don't just leave it there. So the people who are working in hospitals have daily debriefs. They have a support crew from an employee assistance organizations who work with them. That's the same person who works with those teams. So they then have weekly debriefs, monthly, quarterly. So we're onto it. It's very strategic in the way we support them, and it's very considered. And so that support is there for people on a daily basis.
So you I'm just thinking of a question I'm going to ask. You're doing a lot with children and all that, which I think is really great. Is there any chance that this kind of approach could also work for older people, adults, and so on?
Absolutely. And it would also work. I mean, we're working with seriously ill
Right.
And hospitalized children, but it would also work with other groups of vulnerable children. So, happiness and positive psychology is something that works for everyone, quite frankly. And so one of the things that's a side benefit of Starlight being in a hospital is it lifts the morale of the whole hospital team. Mm-hmm. So the hospital team is happier, because if you think of working in a children's hospital, if Starlight was not there, it can be a pretty dour place, and the challenges are every day. But with Starlight there, lifting the spirits, having fun, being silly, it changes everything for the clinicians. I know I've been at the door of a lift, an elevator, as you would say, and before the doors open, a doctor who's been waiting there notices that two captains walk up to hop in the elevator, and the doctor will say, "I'm taking the stairs. I never know what those guys make me do between floors," but laughing about it. So, so our Captain Starlights are about that fun. And the thing about Captain Starlight is they come from planet Starlight. So there's a mythology around them. And they fly to planet Earth every day in an invisible rocket ship that lands on the roof of the Children's Hospital. And the great thing about this is that the children are then in the gun seat because they understand everything about planet Earth and the captains don't. So the captains will do silly things like pick up a pen and use it like a telephone and go, "Hello," and the children will go, "No, not that." So it's that merge of slapstick and kind of vaudeville and the child engaging with the child. But our Captain Starlights will do that silliness with doctors and nurses too, which is also hilarious. And that's the comment from the doctor. So
Right.
It's the morale of the entire hospital because, it changes from having children who are crying and distressed and frightened to children who are roaring with laughter, despite the fact that they're seriously ill. That's great.
How can we bring that to adult patients?
Well, do you know what? I've been working, or I've been walking with our Captain Starlights as they've had to move through an adult part. Some of our hospitals are adults and children's, and then the youth are on the other side. As we've walked through, an elderly person stopped and said, "Hey, Captain, could you sing me a song?" And so they had their ukulele there, and they launched into "You Are My Sun." I think he might have requested "You Are My Sunshine." And you could see immediately the change in that person. So it is something that definitely works. But at the moment, we don't have the funding to meet all of the need that we have for children and young people. So while it's, potentially a great concept, it's not something that we can move into in the immediate future.
Yeah. And you can only do what you can do, but it would seem to me, be exciting if people would bring more of those programs to adults too, because adults could use it. And I'm sure that. I'm not saying anything magical at all, but I would think there are ways to bring a lot of this to adults that would help lift their spirits. I know when my wife was in the hospital, it was very boring for her. Now, she was in a wheelchair, so she was in a chair her whole life. So she had other challenges being in the hospital when she needed to use a restroom or have help with a bedpan. Sometimes it took a while and so on. So just a lot of things that could have been better for her that I think would have made her experience better. And I realized that she was probably, in a sense, a harder case than some, but still, it would just be so nice if we could do more to help all of the different kinds of patients in hospitals and make it a better experience for them.
Yeah, that's what we're doing about changing that healthcare experience.
Yeah. What about the whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so on? How do you deal with a diverse population? So, for example, in all the things that you're talking about, what if you discover that one of the children that you're dealing with is blind in the hospital? How do you adapt so that they get as included as other people in the things that you're doing?
Yeah. We have all of our team are trained in dealing with children who are blind, who are deaf. We actually recently had training, and we had our Captain Starlights. They were all blindfolded, and they were going through sensory experiments to teach them how they can better use sound and other things to work with children. So our team is trained across all of those different areas, because you're right. Every day we do deal with children who are deaf, who are blind, who are in wheelchairs, who are nonverbal, who are on the autism spectrum, all of those things. So we have to have teams trained. Our team is trained to understand how they can deliver an exceptional experience to those children as well as children who don't have those differences. Michael, your mic's gone again.
Let's see if it stays on. There we go.
It's on now.
Yeah. So clearly you have we got to get it done, got a really positive attitude to get things done. Where did you learn that attitude? Because that's a very positive thing that I think more companies and more people in general ought to learn, the whole concept of we're going to get it done no matter what it, I don't want to say no matter what it takes, but we're going to get it done, and we're very positive about that.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I learned it, but I think that there are people in life who you see are that way. I always jokingly call it waiters with their heads up, because you see when you're in a restaurant, often there's those people who walk past your table and don't pick up the dirty plates, who aren't looking for things to do, and then there are those other ones who you can see are going from table to table doing stuff everywhere. And I always say they're the people I want to employ, the waiters with their heads up. So I think it's an attitude you have in life, and you can either kind of say, well, that's a challenge and that's difficult, but how can I get that done? Or you can say, well, that's difficult, I just won't do that anymore. And we need people who want to get stuff done, and who always have and having a positive attitude just makes you feel so much better than dwelling in the negative. I hate people who are always those negative Nellies or Neds, or whoever they are, and they bring you down. So positivity is something that I think helps all of us every day. And why wouldn't you choose to be positive?
Yeah, and it is a choice. And the reality is that no matter what goes on, I think we can choose to be positive. One of the things that I've been saying for many years that I learned because of the World Trade Center basically is, don't worry about what you can control, focus on what you can, let the rest take care of itself. We're so worried about every little old thing in the world that we don't tend to be positive about anything, and that doesn't help any of us.
No, I think that being positive is so incredibly important. It makes you feel better and happier, makes everybody around you feel better and happier. So why wouldn't you do it? And I actually use this at Starlight too, because sometimes team members, like, you reach a point in your work life, and I left Starlight because I needed a new challenge, and Starlight didn't have that challenge for me. So why hang around and become that disgruntled person in the corner who's just trying to pull everybody else into their negative little corner and who finds fault with everything the organization does? Why would you stay? And if you leave in that instance, you go to somewhere where you can contribute and you feel great and you're doing a great job. The organization gets someone into your role who really wants to be there, and all that negativity stops. So in positive psychology, the end game is flourishing. And so I jokingly say at my team all the time, if you don't want to be here anymore, if you're not feeling challenged, please go flourish somewhere else. Don't stay here and become that negative person who tries to bring everyone into their negative corner. It's just not good for you or anybody else. So, so the go flourish somewhere else is a bit of a joke that people say they're going to have printed on my coffee mug at some stage.
Well, and you went away, but you also came back.
That's right. That's right. And so I went away because I needed a new challenge at that stage. And that challenge potentially was the CEO role, and it wasn't available then. So I went and I did something else that I loved. And then, the board came back to me sometime later and said, would you come back as CEO now? And I said, yes. So
there you go.
And then I'd had a different experience, which actually helped me to be a better CEO. So as you say, if you're always moving forward, if you don't get hung up about things, and if you choose positivity, that really can set you up for a much better life.
What are some of the challenges that Starlight is facing in Australia today?
I think that for us, it's a nice challenge because as clinicians recognize the power of positive psychology and the power of the mind in improving health outcomes, there very creative, and they're coming up with more and more ideas as to how Starlight could be used. But we can only deliver if we increase our funding. And obviously, I think globally, communities are under pressure financially, and so those things kind of don't work together. And that's a challenge for us. I think we live in a world of increasing complexity and compliance, and we need to, within that, ensure we meet the requirements and the criteria, but we do it in the simplest possible way, because simplicity is better for your mental health. It's more effective and efficient. And so sometimes within the complexity of compliance, people err on making things even more bureaucratic than they need to. So really keeping things simple, I think, is important against the backdrop of what's happening. And the exciting thing is we work in the sector of healthcare, and healthcare is always changing, always improving. And that's a great thing to be part of.
What do you think what would you tell somebody from, let's say, one of your former jobs in marketing and so on? What kind of advice would you give them based on what you now know as being the CEO of Starlight for, my gosh, 15 years, 14, almost,
Yeah.
15 years.
Yes.
Almost 16 years.
Yeah. I think that I think people have to be true to themselves. You have to be authentic. Choose positivity is something that I would always give advice around, because, as you said, it is a choice, and I fail to understand why anyone would choose the negative side of that equation. And really focus on getting stuff done. So never sit back and be lazy. Always be working to be that person who thinks about themselves, others, and cares and gets it done.
Yeah, we spend way too much time, because I think we're taught so much to be negative, and we don't get taught nearly as much about being as positive as we can be. I know that my parents were always encouraging to me and my brother. I'm not sure my brother always got it quite as much as I did in terms of understanding it, but we were taught that positivity was a choice. We were taught that being innovative and moving forward was a choice. And we also were encouraged to make that the choice that we made too, which is part of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is, I would say, do not be a perfectionist. I'm an anti-perfectionist.
Yeah, I agree.
It gets you nowhere, doesn't exist. And, especially in this day where we can move and we're very agile, I say 70% and out, because if you say 70% and out, it means people will probably go to 80 or 90%. But those people who, if anyone in an interview proudly tells me they're a perfectionist, they're gone, because all they do is drive themselves and everyone around them crazy. So I don't want to have them in the organization.
It seems to me that the thing to say is that I will always do the best that I can do, and I will always give at least 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfection is something I don't think most of us understand anyway, but if we give it our best, probably we'll achieve perfection in a sense.
Yeah, and get it done, get it out, get it happening.
Right.
Because the other thing is, if it's not perfect, you get it out and you get to use it and you learn so much more. So you got actually a better shot at getting it towards it. You can tweak it after.
Yeah. Well,
while it's in market.
Well, and what you do is you do the best that you can do, but if you're wise, and good leaders know this, you also work with a team, and sometimes somebody else on the team can take the lead and enhance what you're doing, which is always a good thing.
Absolutely. You've got to have way smarter people all around you.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with having smarter people around you.
No,
your smarts is in bringing the team together.
Yes, that's right. So
What can you think other regions and countries learn from the challenges that you're facing?
I think we have, I think the world is so consistent in this day and age, more than it's kind of ever been. You know, when you travel, you seek out those places where we're different. Of course, we're different, but there's a lot more that's the same in this day and age than there ever has been. And in some instances, I think that's quite sad.
Yeah.
But there's much more consistency. So I think that there's always something that we can learn from each other, always. And that's what I look for. I'm excited by learning things, and and something that doesn't go according to plan is fabulous, because you learn so much more from that than something that just smoothly goes along and does everything you thought it would do.
Nothing wrong with learning from things that don't go well. I don't like the term failure, and even mistakes I'm not a great fan of, but I think that what happens is that things don't always go as we plan. And the real question is, what do we learn from it?
Absolutely.
Which is so cool. Well, Louise, this has been absolutely fun to be able to spend all this time with you. Now it's 10 in the morning where you are, so we should let you go do other things and get something done today. But I want to thank you for being here. And I want to thank all of you who are listening for being a part of our podcast today. I'd love to hear your thoughts about what Louise had to say, and I hope that you will communicate with her. And that's a good point. Louise, how can people reach out to you if they'd like to talk with you and maybe learn more from you and what you have to say?
I'm on LinkedIn, so if those listening are on LinkedIn, you can find me, Louise Baxter, Starlight Children's Foundation, Australia, or you can go to starlight.org.au if you're looking for us, our website, and you'll find me through that as well.
Cool. Well, I hope people will reach out, and if you'd like to reach out to me, and I hope you will, you may email me at michaelhi, michaelhi at accessiBe, accessibe.com. And you can also, of course, go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is spelled michaelhingson.com/podcast. You can listen to all of our podcasts there. You can reach out to me there. Lots of things you can do on the web. It's an amazing thing to be able to do things on the web. I also would really appreciate it if, when you are thinking about us, if you'll give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to us or watching us. We really appreciate your ratings and your comments, so please do that. If you know of anyone who you think might be a good guest, and Louise, you as well, if you can think of anybody else who we ought to have on Unstoppable Mindset, would definitely appreciate you introducing us. We're always looking to have more people to come on and tell their stories and talk about what they do. That's the best way to learn, is learning by listening to other people and them telling their stories. So hopefully you'll all do that. And again, Louise, I want to thank you for being here. This has been a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. Have a wonderful evening.